Welcome back once again, Malifaux players, and today we are talking strategies in Malifaux. At the time of this recording, we are in Gaining Grounds 4, where we have 4 key strategies available to us when we come to a tabletop game. That will be Stuff the Ballots, Plant Explosives, Raid the Vaults, and Cloak and Dagger. Now each of these will play in a slightly different way, but what the point of this video is to try and give you some ideas on how to play each of these missions and just give you an oversight on some of the key mechanics you need to be aware of when playing these missions on the tabletop. In today's video, to help me, I'm going to be using my Nekima crew. The reason for this is because I like a fast crew, plus it's Nekima. I like it. As always, we have our battlefield ready. This is the same one that we used for our intro video. The terrain is from Plascraft. Unfortunately, the company aren't any longer really in existence, so you can still find it, but it is on eBay. Typically, you'll go. To be clear, strategy is the important part of this game. It is the main overarching thing and is the linking part to schemes. The strategy is something that is revealed to both players at the start of the game, and each can score on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4 and turn 5 respectively if they meet the conditions. Schemes, however, which is in a separate video, have 2 parts, a reveal and an end. They have specific conditions that must be met, and we'll talk about that in a different video. For each strategy, there is certain rules and permutations that we must abide by to ensure that we are playing the game properly. When we go to our top-down view and our tabletop, we will see how these things are laid out and how this might influence our battlefield and potentially our choices. Can I please remind you, obviously, that there is 4 types of deployment. We're using a marked map from gamemap.eu, which we support and can get access to ourselves through our distribution channels. So if you're considering Malifaux maps, reach out to us. They've got a range of different designs. We've got the cobblestone city map for today's game. In Raid the Vaults, there is 6 strategy markers conveniently placed around the battlefield. There is 1 in each table quarter, as seen by the examples here. Okay, and there is obviously ones on the other side, which we will try and show, but realistically, not from our camera. We also have 2 markers in the middle. Raid the Vaults is a really easy game and a nice easy way to get started. If we imagine that our Nekima crew has started on this side and is coming across the board, and we are against our Seamus crew from our example turn video, just using a handful of models here to showcase. The way this is scored is really simply. You must have the most number of models around each of these markers. They must be within 2 inches of that marker. So for example here, currently this mature Nephilim is not within range of the marker. This would mean he's not scoring. There are some important factors to take into account with this. The first is that the markers must be on the centre line or in your opponent's table half. So as the Nekima crew deployed over here in a standard or wedge deployment, these 2 in the far back corner that we cannot see will not be able to be scored for them. They can still deny them, however, and that is an important thing to matter. So for turn 2, we would need to control one of these markers. In this case here, as we can see, the young Nephilim is the only one here, and he controls that marker at the end of the turn. And this side over here, although we have Seamus and we have a Rotten Bell and the mature Nephilim, in actual fact, as both models here are within an inch, 1 and 1, they do cancel each other out. Therefore, no one is scoring that marker. In turn 2, you must control 1 marker. In turn 3, you must control the equivalent to 2. In turn 4, equivalent to 3. Turn 5, equivalent to 4. Now, to be clear, we can be really clever here. The ones on the centre line are worth equivalent to 1. The ones in the enemy's table half are worth 2. So in actual fact, our young Nephilim that is currently down here could actually still score this turn 3 for us without any issue because he is the only one there. Now, As with most strategies, There is a caveat here that in actual fact, summon models, so for example, a summoned corrupted hound, do not count towards that limit. So in the case here, if I had these two models, although there is 2 and 2 models, it is really important to note that the corrupted hound as a summoned model would not count, and this would in actual fact be controlled by the Seamus crew. It's really important to make sure that you are aware of which are your summon models in the case of summoning masters and which are the original models. This becomes a real key factor in later play. In our next interaction, we're going to show off the game Stuff the Ballots. This was showed in our demo turn video, but we're going to show in a little bit more detail now. In Stuff the Ballots, there are 7 markers placed around the battlefield. There is 1 in each table quarter, 1 in the centre, and then 1 across the centre line. So in this case, because we're using a standard or wedge deployment, they would go on the centre line at the far edges. Should we be playing a corner deployment, it would mean, or wedge, that this marker would actually end up in our corner over here, next to my Haribo. The aim of this strategy is yet again to control more markers each turn. So in turn 2, you must control 1 marker. In turn 3, you must control 2. In turn 4, you must control 3. And in turn 5, you must control 4 markers. To control a marker, a model must be within an inch and then spend an action to interact. We're using the Rampage Games GG4 set here to do so. They can interact as many times as they like and have AP to do so. There is something to be aware of though, that when we hit 6 interactions, so in the case potentially of having the White Rabbit Company and the Young Nephilim, if he was to interact twice, currently this would be under control of the Seamus player. Obviously, each time we can activate it and do more actions to ensure that we are cloning the markers. In the event of a tie, nobody is considered to be controlling the marker. Now, at this moment in time, we can see that there is no model in engagement here. So 1 inch and 1 inch. This means they can interact freely. However, if this wasn't a young Nephilim, and this was in actual fact a mature Nephilim, who has a 2-inch engagement, currently, unless the White Rabbit Company has the special ability to called Don't Mind Me, he would not currently be able to interact. But because the White Rabbit Company is not engaging the mature Nephilim, that mature Nephilim would still be able to interact. This would therefore put it under the control of the Nekima player. Please be aware again on special rules affecting this mission. The first one is that you cannot interact with these markers on the first turn. So that means you may want to have models hold back to interact with your home Stuff the Ballot markers before moving them forward. Secondly, again, like in all gaining grounds, the summoned models could not interact with the marker. So again, if Nekima had somehow summoned a corrupted hound, that model, although could deny a model from interacting, would not be able to interact with the marker itself. Again, a really important note, yet again, to ensure that you are tracking who is your summon models and who is your models that start on the table when playing a summoning master, such as Nekima or Dreamer or even Seamus 2 that we use in our videos quite regularly. The third mission we're showing off in today's video is plant explosives. This is one of my favourite strategies to play. It comes from a previous GG. What we've got here is effectively people trying to drop markers in the opponent's table half to score victory points. Currently, we have a plant explosive marker down just for the purpose of this demonstration. We also have a mature Nephilim who has an explosive marker, which indicates he is carrying a explosive bomb. There are some special things to be aware of before we get into the interactions with dropping bombs and placing them. The first is that when a bomb is placed, no other bomb can be placed within 6 inches. So from his current location, he would only be able to put a bomb somewhere realistically over here, out of the way of other models. If a bomb is on the center line, then it counts for both players, meaning potentially giving away some of those key important victory points. You can also, if we just move this over here and say that it's actually been dropped further afield, we can drop a marker here. It is outside of 6 inches. We would then remove the explosive token to say that that model no longer has any bombs. Interestingly, a leader or a henchman or enforcer can hold 2 bombs. A minion can only hold 1 at the start of the game, and you have to give out 5 of them at the start of the game. This is where fast and quick models that can get over the table are really important. What we can also do, however, is when a bomb is placed, it is not the end of the world. We can interact with them ourselves, and we can remove our enemy's bomb tokens. So let's just say that in actual fact this bomb was dropped by the Seamus player, and we're going to put it just over here. As long as this mature Nephilim is in base contact with this marker, it can take an interact action to pick that marker up, gain an explosive token, and then it could even, for its second AP, drop that marker on the other side. This would then go from the Seamus player scoring a point to the Nekima player scoring a point instead. Again, the caveat still has to be that it has to be outside of 6 inches. And again, special things to note is if the model is engaged, unless it has Don't Mind Me, it would not be able to interact with the marker. So currently this Rotten Bell would stop the mature Nephilim from doing that action. In this game, it is really important to make sure that you are not placing markers right just by the edge. This is because obviously of the example we just said, where if they were not engaged, they could move the marker easily to the other side with 2 actions. Realistically, you'd want to make sure that the marker is far enough up so that if a base model was to base and drop it, it wouldn't actually clear the halfway line. The last mission we're going to show off today as part of the Gaining Grounds 4 is Cloak and Dagger. Now Cloak and Dagger is a really interesting game as these tokens will move around the board. They will all start on the centre line, with it being a standard or wedge deployment, and it would obviously be on the diagonal line should it be a flank or a corner deployment. Importantly, that when you place these, it is alternating, starting with a defender, and you get to place 2. There are some rules to this, and in actual fact, you cannot place them within 6 of each other. To score points in Cloak and Dagger, we have to interact with the marker to gain intel tokens. When we gain intel tokens, we can then score VP by discarding them at the end of each turn. So let's just say we have our mature Nephilim, he is back in the fray, and we have our Rotten Bell. What's going to happen is that the mature Nephilim is going to interact with the marker and gain an intel. When he gains that intel, what's going to happen is the opposing player, so in this case the Seamus player, will get to move this marker 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is drop it roughly there. This is where it can get really complex and really challenging for certain players, so much that you want to potentially interact early to get the intel tokens and stack them on your models to then discard them at the end of the turn. Just to be clear, if you were to discard tokens from a model, if they had, for example, let's say 3 tokens, but you only needed to discard 1, you would still have to discard all tokens from that model, meaning it would then become tokenless. So it's really important to think about and strategize how you're going to interact with those markers. Now, we don't necessarily have to interact with the markers to score victory points in this mission. we can interact with models that have an intel token. And this is a common misconception and mistake, which is why we're going to highlight this in the video now. The Rotten Bell can walk up to the engagement of the mature Nephilim and interact to steal the token. Importantly, if the mature Nephilim hasn't activated, the mature Nephilim cannot steal that token back. So this would allow that Rotten Bell to be safe from some models, but not all. Interestingly as well, let's say that in actual fact, the Cavern Nephilim had the token and the Rotten Bell was going to try and steal it. If that Rotten Bell was engaged by the mature Nephilim, and obviously has a 2-inch range anywhere here, that Rotten Bell, unless they had Don't Mind Me, would not be able to interact to steal that marker. However, should they have been placed here, outside of the engagement of the mature Nephilim, they could interact to steal the token from that Cavern Nephilim to allow them to score points. This would mean that the Cavern Nephilim would no longer be able to steal the token, but there's nothing stopping the mature Nephilim to come up and take it. Again, with all interactions in this GG, typically, if you have Don't Mind Me, you can interact freely, but you cannot interact with a marker if you're engaged. So although this mature Nephilim is within an inch of the marker, it does have a Rotten Bell engaging it, and therefore would not be able to interact. Same interaction again, in this case, outside of an inch of the bell, but within 2 inches of the mature Nephilim, he would be able to interact to gain tokens, but the Rotten Bell would not. Hopefully you find that video on Malifaux strategies really helpful. And hopefully in due course, by the time this video actually comes out, there'll be a schemes one as well. But if not, don't fret, there'll be one coming. If you like the tokens used in our Gaining Ground strategy video today, check out Rampage Games. They do the different sets available to you to help you track your games at the tabletop. If you think you've got a better idea about how to play any of these strategies, leave them in a comment below and we'll respond and see if you're right or wrong. Guarantee, probably wrong, but we'll listen anyway. So, until next time, stay weird.